5 years ago on Halloween night, a time that normally would have been filled with parties, costumes, and the comforting buzz of celebration. But this wasn't a normal year. The pandemic had turned everything upside down. Bars were closed, events were canceled, and most people were hunkered down in their homes. The streets outside were quiet, unnervingly so, and I was feeling the heavy, gnawing weight of restlessness. I'd been alone for days, stuck in the same rhythm of scrolling, pacing, and overthinking. In that moment of boredom and creeping loneliness, I reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to in a while. Leo. He was someone I had dated in the past, someone with whom things had ended on a complicated note. There were unresolved tensions, lingering emotions, and a sense that our story hadn't quite concluded. Still, despite our past, we'd shared something genuine, a passion for stories, especially horror, and a deep, mutual appreciation for the eerie writings of H.P. Lovecraft. I sent him a message, not really expecting much, just feeling the need to connect. "Want to go for a walk tonight?" I asked, hoping he'd say yes. To my surprise, he agreed. We decided to meet at a familiar place under the old stone church that stood halfway between our homes. At 9:30, I bundled up in layers and stepped out into the cool October night. The sky was clear, with a thin crescent moon hanging low over the rooftops. There was a strange stillness in the air. As I approached the church, I noticed how unusually quiet everything was. Too quiet for Halloween, even with the pandemic. No kids in costumes, no music drifting out of windows, no groups of friends laughing or goofing around, just a few faint sounds of distant cars and the occasional wind brushing through dry leaves. Leo was already there when I arrived, leaning against the iron railing, hands in his coat pockets. We greeted each other with a slightly awkward smile and started walking. Slowly at first, making small talk to break the tension. But soon enough, the rhythm of our steps and the familiarity of our connection kicked in. We slipped back into a kind of flow, joking, reminiscing, catching each other up on life. We chose to walk through the older part of town, a place we both love for its cobbled streets, crooked buildings, and haunted charm. Normally, the area would be bustling with tourists and locals alike, especially on Halloween. But that night, it felt almost post-apocalyptic. Most of the shops were closed, and we saw only a few scattered figures moving quietly through the shadows. The silence was uncanny, giving the town a dreamlike quality, like we'd stepped into an abandoned movie set. Both of us walked quickly, and before long we reached the foot of the castle, a historic landmark perched on a cliff overlooking the river. The massive stone structure loomed ahead, its dark silhouette set against the night sky. From there we had two options. Either turn around and head back the way we came, or keep walking along a narrow boardwalk that hugged the cliffside. The second path led to a large, mostly deserted park, and was flanked by thick trees that left it almost entirely in darkness. It wasn't the smartest choice considering the time and the eerie atmosphere, but we didn't hesitate. Lost in conversation, we instinctively took the boardwalk, laughing at how spooky the whole scene felt. It was the kind of night that made the hairs on the back of your neck stand up for no specific reason. As we walked deeper into the tree-covered path, I began to feel that delicious tingle of fear. Not the kind that makes you run, but the kind that makes you tell ghost stories. I started bringing up old horror movie cliches, poking fun at how we were basically walking into a textbook slasher setup. Two people alone, on Halloween, in a shadowy, isolated spot far from anyone who could help if something went wrong. We passed under a particularly creepy lamppost that kept flickering, buzzing faintly above us. I stopped beneath it and theatrically declared, "This is where the killer shows up, right?" Leo chuckled, but the laugh was short and nervous, like he felt it too. That subtle, creeping sense that something was off. Still, we pressed on, brushing it off as just Halloween jitters. After about 10 minutes, we exited the boardwalk and found ourselves in the open space of the park. The silence followed us, but the feeling of danger had faded. We looped around toward the entrance of the old town, preparing to call it a night. That's when we noticed it, flashing lights in the distance and the rising sound of sirens. As we drew closer, we saw police cars and ambulances racing toward the very area we had just come from. The lights painted everything in harsh, surreal colors: red, blue, red, blue, bouncing off the stone buildings and cobblestones like we were suddenly inside a crime scene. We stopped and asked a bystander what was going on. The man, visibly shaken, told us that someone had been wandering around with a knife, attacking people. My first thought was that it must have been some drunken Halloween prank or a mentally unstable person trying to scare people. I laughed nervously and said something like, "What a night, huh?" But the man wasn't amused. He looked at us and said, "Seriously, you should go home. Lock your doors." A heavy silence fell between Leo and me. Something had shifted. We weren't joking anymore. I walked Leo back to his apartment, our earlier ease replaced by an anxious quiet. Then I hurried to my own place, adrenaline beginning to kick in. My heart was pounding, and I found myself locking the door a little faster than usual, checking the windows out of instinct. Once inside, I reached for my phone and opened social media. That's when the gravity of the situation fully hit me. My feed was flooded with breaking news and local posts. The rumors were real, and worse than I had imagined. Around 10:30 p.m., a man dressed in medieval-style clothing, wielding what was described as a katana or sword, had gone on a stabbing rampage through the old part of Quebec City. 2 people had been killed. 5 more had been seriously injured, all at random. He had started near the castle, right where we had just been. My hands began to tremble as I pieced together the timeline. The attacks had started just minutes after we passed through that area. If we had decided to turn around instead of taking the boardwalk, we might have crossed paths with the killer. We had unknowingly walked just ahead of tragedy. Later, I found out a friend of mine had been walking nearby that same night. He wasn't so lucky. The attacker had found him. He survived, but not without damage. He lost a finger in the struggle, and his physical recovery took months. Emotionally, I can't imagine. Even now, 5 years later, I think about that night, about how close it all was, how easily things could have gone differently, about how random, fragile, and unfair life can be. We always think we're safe in the places we know. We think that danger has a face or a warning sign, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it wears a costume and walks silently behind you. And sometimes the smallest choices, like which path to take, end up being the reason you survive. Some stories don't feel real until you're the one living them, until the nightmare isn't on your screen. It's in your phone, in your apartment, in your best friend's voice at 11:20 p.m. I always believed monsters were easy to spot. They lurked in dark alleys or wore ski masks or had mugshots buried in some criminal database. But I was wrong. Sometimes they show up dressed well, carrying wine and home-cooked meals. Sometimes they have perfect smiles and charming Tinder bios. And sometimes they never leave a trace behind. Friday night was nothing special. The weather was humid. My window was cracked open. I was curled on the couch in sweatpants, barely paying attention to some background TV noise. It was one of those evenings where everything feels safe, familiar, still. Emily had other plans. She'd matched with a guy on Tinder earlier that week. Daniel, supposedly 29, lived nearby, said all the right things. He didn't push for anything weird. No late-night texts, no red flags, at least not on the surface. He asked if she'd like to come over for dinner that night. He wanted to cook for her. She said yes. She'd sent me the address, a short-term rental in a good neighborhood. It looked clean, upscale, nothing sketchy. She kept her location on, just like I asked. Everything felt normal. She even checked in that evening, said the place was beautiful, the food smelled amazing, and he'd gone all out with candles and music. Steak, sausages, a few side dishes that sounded like something from a restaurant menu. She sounded happy, comfortable. By all appearances, it was just another date with someone who tried a little harder than most. Hours passed. Around 11:20 p.m., I got a call from her. It was short, disjointed. Her voice was hoarse, like she'd been screaming or vomiting. Her breathing was erratic and she was panicked, more afraid than I'd ever heard her. She couldn't finish her sentences. Something about pain, her stomach, vomiting, blood. That's all I needed to hear. I called emergency services immediately and gave them her location. I was already pulling on my shoes when the dispatcher confirmed help was on the way. I grabbed my keys and drove straight to the hospital. By the time I arrived, she'd already been rushed into a room. There's a special kind of stillness in emergency rooms at night. The flickering fluorescent lights, the cold seats, the faint beeping of machines behind thin curtains. I sat there for what felt like hours, my mind racing through 1,000 impossible scenarios. A doctor eventually approached. His tone was clinical, almost too calm. Emily was stable. They were running tests. They'd collected a sample from her vomit to check for toxins or allergens. And then, something about her stomach contents didn't align with anything routine. He mentioned trace elements in the meat she had consumed, proteins that didn't match any livestock. Not pork, not beef, not poultry, not game. Then he said it, human, not directly, not dramatically, but his words carried the weight of something that shouldn't happen outside of horror films. I couldn't process it at first. A human meat? I asked him to repeat himself, hoping I'd misunderstood. But the answer didn't change. When Emily was conscious again, she confirmed everything. He'd made the meal himself, said it was a family recipe. He'd plated it beautifully. Medium rare steak, handmade sausage, seasoned vegetables. She said the food was delicious, rich, heavy, but not in a way that set off alarm bells. She'd eaten most of it before the pain started. At first it was nausea, then cramps, then something deeper, like her insides were turning against her. The vomiting started shortly after, and that's when she saw blood. Everything else blurred after that. The police got involved right away. They went to the apartment, only to find it empty, no sign of the man Emily had described. The place had already been wiped down. Not thoroughly, but efficiently. The dishes had been rinsed. The garbage had been taken out. No clothing in the closet, no toiletries in the bathroom. It was as if he'd never lived there at all, which it turned out he hadn't. The apartment was a short-term Airbnb, rented under a false name, using a prepaid card and an email that was deleted minutes after the booking was confirmed. There were no fingerprints, no digital footprint. Even the Tinder profile vanished the same night. Deleted or deactivated, no way to tell. But the food remained. In the refrigerator, they found more meat, wrapped in butcher paper, some raw, some partially cooked. Samples were taken and tests later confirmed the unthinkable. It was human flesh. Multiple donors. Gender undetermined. The investigation stalled from there. There was no paper trail, no DNA on file. The security cameras from the building were useless. He kept his face turned, wore a hat, never looked directly into the lens. His profile photo from Tinder was no help either. Facial recognition turned up nothing. It may not have even been a real person. AI-generated images had become so convincing, there was no way to confirm whether Daniel ever truly existed. He was a phantom with perfect teeth and just the right amount of stubble, the kind of face that put people at ease. Whoever he was, he had done this before. That became clear as more reports trickled in. Similar cases in other cities, victims who vanished after dates, others who were found in hospitals with no idea what they had eaten. The police believed he traveled, rented properties for short periods, used different names, changed his appearance, moved on before anyone could catch up. He left no patterns, no motive, no manifesto, just bodies. Sometimes whole, sometimes not. Emily survived. The poison, or whatever it was, didn't cause lasting physical damage, but something inside her broke that night. She didn't talk much after. Not about what happened, not about dating, not about anything that reminded her of him. She stopped eating meat entirely, couldn't stand the smell of it. Couldn't stand restaurants. Couldn't even look at food that looked too rich or too rare. For weeks, she didn't sleep. Every noise felt like a threat. As for me, I deleted every dating app on my phone. I couldn't trust them anymore. Not after realizing how easy it was for someone to lie, to smile, to plan a dinner designed not to impress, but to trap. People think horror is ghosts, demons, curses, but real horror is slower, colder, more human. Real horror is your best friend calling you because her insides are tearing apart from a meal she thought was made with love. The worst part, we still don't know who he was. and we probably never will. The man who cooked my friend human flesh walked away without leaving a footprint. No name, no identity, no consequence. He's out there, somewhere, maybe using another name, another face, another apartment rented for a few nights at a time, cooking for someone else. Right now, he could be chatting with another woman, or man, or couple, telling them he's a chef, that he loves old recipes, that he wants to impress them with something personal. And unless they ask the right questions, unless they notice something, anything, he'll serve them just like he served Emily, carefully, elegantly, and with the kind of patience that only monsters have. Just a little information for you all before I tell my story. My job is to find missing people. Families and police stations usually call me and others like myself to find said people. Over the course of my career, I've found quite a few people, but some I've never been able to find. Despite that, I took pride in my job because I could find and help people. But after this case, I haven't been the same. I will warn those with weak stomachs that what I am about to say isn't suited for some. A few years back, I was contacted by a family I'm friends with. They were searching for their missing daughter and her two friends. They had gone on a cross-country road trip. A week into their road trip, all contact between them and their families was cut off. The families went to the local police, but there wasn't much they could do, so they turned to me. The case was somewhat personal, so to say I was impatient to find them was an understatement. I first had the families pull up their messages between them and their children. I had to cover every base, from them wanting to run away from home to someone wanting to harm them. I got the license plate to the car they took and ran it through multiple databases to find it in any CCTVs along the roads they took. I got a ping that the car was seen at a gas station a few states over. The gas station was on a long, desolate road. The road itself wasn't in the best condition, and the gas station didn't look all that good. Upon showing the clerk at the gas station their pictures, he confirmed that he had seen him. They looked fine at the time and were headed west. I thanked him and followed the road westwards. While driving down the road, my tire went out and I crashed into the side railings. Thankfully, I didn't sustain any injuries, but I was now stranded in the middle of nowhere. I decided to survey the area and noticed that the trees looked damaged. The sun was setting, so I grabbed my flashlight and peeked over the edge of the railings. Perhaps the car went off into the gully. I placed the flashlight in my chest pocket and climbed down the hill. At the bottom of the hill lay a wrecked car. The car looked so heavily damaged that they shouldn't have been able to get out, but somehow there was no one inside. Though dried and nearly concealed by foliage, there were some blood splotches. I went to my radio to call for some police officers and an ambulance, but to my dismay, all I got was static. A twig snapped behind me, and before I had the chance to turn around, something hard connected with my head, and I found my vision go dark and my mind blank. I woke up in near pitch darkness, except for the light bulb that hung above me. My head throbbed painfully. What the hell happened? Assessing my condition, I was strapped to a chair with my legs and arms firmly bound. Based on my surroundings, I assumed I was in a basement. It smelled of rot and mold, and I struggled to not throw up. I could hear rats scurrying around just out of my line of sight. A door opened, and in walked a man who was so mutated, it was hard to say he was even human. "Hey, who the hell are you?" I shouted. He came closer, and I could see a horrible grin plastered on his face. He held a knife in one hand. "You're the one who took those 3 girls, weren't you? What did you do to them?" I asked. He didn't respond, but he had a displeased look on his face. Before I knew it, he stabbed the knife into my hand. My body jolted from the pain, and I wanted to scream out in agony, but I held it in. "You sick bastard. You probably get off to this, huh? Well, hate to break it to you, but it'll take more than that to make me scream," I retorted through heavy breaths. He tilted his head and began twisting the knife in my hand. The pain was unbearable, but I refused to give him what he wanted. I couldn't help the tears that built up in my eyes and quickly fell. He was still dissatisfied, so he pulled the knife from my hand. He placed it over my pinky, lining it up. I struggled against my binds as I knew what he was about to do. However, before I could protest, He slammed the knife down and severed my pinky from my hand. I couldn't hold my screams any longer. "Son of a bitch! Go to hell, you motherfucker!" I screamed in agony. I heard his sick laugh echo throughout the basement, and he said, "Got you! I'll be taking this." Just like that, he picked up my finger and left me in the basement to suffer alone in agony. The pain clouded my brain and made it hard to think straight. Blood still poured from my hand, coating the chair arm before dripping to the floor. After what felt like hours, I passed out from the pain and blood loss. I woke up once more and saw that my hand was bandaged with a dirty cloth. I looked up to see a horrific sight. In front of me sat a table with human body parts laid on it. The body parts were so mutilated, you almost couldn't tell it belonged to a person. I gagged at the sight. "He's a cannibal?" In his hands were a bowl and spoon. He was stirring the spoon in the bowl and turned towards me. Upon seeing I was awakened, he came over to me. The smell was putrid, and I could feel my stomach turning at the sight of the contents of the bowl. I turned away, but he grabbed my face and forced my mouth open. He shoved the spoon in my mouth. It was horrible and tears filled my eyes. I spit the contents back out and vomited. He looked unhappy that I didn't eat it. He set the bowl down and walked over to a wall, which held multiple tools. He grabbed some pliers and came back over to me. "What are you gonna do?" I asked, breathless. He didn't answer as he pulled off 3 of my fingernails. Tears fell from my eyes and I screamed. His smile widened and he laughed his creepy, sick laugh. "You son of a b***!" I yelled. He didn't mind me and simply grabbed my fingernails, leaving me alone once more. Blood dripped from my fingertips. I hung my head low from exhaustion. Just how long have I been here? Out of sheer desperation, I moved my injured hand, and much to my surprise, it was easier to move than my other hand, perhaps due to the blood that coated it. I twisted and turned my hand slowly, releasing it from its bindings a little at a time. My hand and arm ached from the tight pull of the bindings, but after what felt like forever, my hand was free. I panted from the pain and held my hand close to my chest to relieve some of the pain. I then released my other hand and feet from the bindings. I rushed for the door, but it was locked. I searched around the basement, the dim light of the bulb being my only salvation. In one of the corners, I found a flashlight in a box. I flipped it on and was able to see considerably better. The basement floor was covered in old blood stains and rotten pieces of flesh, presumably human flesh. I dry heaved and focused on finding a weapon I could use. Unfortunately, whenever he left, he took his tools he had on the wall with him. I searched around and miraculously found a crowbar he left behind. I unscrewed the light bulb from its socket and fell into total darkness except for the light from the flashlight. I hid in a concealed area behind the door and waited for him to come back. After a while, I heard heavy footsteps and readied myself in the encompassing darkness. The metal door screeched open and he stepped into the basement. Perhaps due to the unexpected darkness in the once poorly lit basement, he paused. I used that to my advantage and swung the crowbar as hard as I could against the back of his head. He grunted and fell over. I ran up the stairs, tripping over some uneven boards, and came out into an old rundown and decrepit house. I rushed through the house and barged through the front door. I ran into the chilly night air. I could hear sounds from within the house and dread filled me. How was he up already? I ran blindly through the woods, tripping over tree roots and slipping on leaves covered in dew. I stepped on something cold and metallic, and before I had time to react, it clamped down on my leg. The bear trap broke my leg in several places, and I screamed as I fell over, blood pouring from my leg. I could hear movement in the woods from the direction I had come from. I knew it was him. I pried the trap open and thankfully got my leg out. My leg was messed up beyond belief. It was mangled and I could barely stand on it. The noise got closer, so I forced myself to run. This, however, didn't work, and he appeared right behind me and tackled me down. He had an ice pick and was trying to stab me with it. I struggled with him and managed to knock it out of his hands. I kneeled him in the gut, which released his hold on me, and I scrambled for the ice pick. He grabbed my mangled leg and dragged me back to him. I yelled in pain as he flipped me over and began strangling me. I couldn't breathe and felt my consciousness slipping as I blindly grabbed for the ice pick. I felt the cool metal and saw a ray of hope. I grabbed it in my hand and with one swift movement stabbed it into his neck. He fell back onto the ground, making a gurgling noise. I struggled up and continued limping onwards. I soon found a dirt road which led me to the highway. I collapsed on the side of the highway just as a car spotted me and pulled over. The person rushed to me as I succumbed to the darkness. I don't know much of what happened after that, but I woke up in a hospital a few days later. I was told that I was probably held in that basement for about 4 to 5 days. I was told I had gotten lucky, but I didn't really feel like I had. Everything that happened broke me. How could I tell those families what had really happened to their children? For months after everything happened, I still couldn't stand the smell or sight of meat. In the end, I wasn't able to tell them. A police officer who arrived at the scene had to. This case really fucked me up mentally and physically. I walked with a limp and relied on a cane. Mentally, I was even more screwed up. I could longer stand being near sharp objects, being in dark places, and I could no longer perform my job properly. I quit once I got well enough to go out and about. I'd like to say that somehow I'll get over this, but even after 4 years, I haven't mentally recovered from it. I'm not sure why I decided to share this. Maybe I just needed to let it out. But stay safe nonetheless, everyone. And that's a wrap for today's video. I hope you enjoyed these chilling stories. If you did, don't forget to drop a comment with your favorite one, hit that like button, and subscribe for more spine-tingling tales coming your way. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.